Hello everybody, this is Sutek94 and I have performed yet another act of necromancy to bring a long-dead card game back to life, if only for this video. I've mentioned before in this series of videos how one Magic the Gathering lit the fuse that eventually caused an explosion of other companies making their own collectible card games in attempts to grab some of that magic dosh. Competitors like Galactic Empires were among the first to jump on the new collectible card game bandwagon. While some of these competitors did survive beyond 1996, if only barely, most of them died a quick death due to various reasons. These boxes you've been staring at for a little while belong to a game in the latter category, Towers in Time. Towers in Time was designed by Mike Sager and published by Thunder Castle Games in 1994. There are copyright dates for both 1994 and 1995 all over the place, and I believe this is because the limited edition, what you're looking at here, came out in late 1994, with the rulebook listing an original edition due out in early 1995. Like Hyborian Gates, Towers in Time features good old-fashioned interdimensional warfare, this time featuring towers that some dudes built in between dimensions. I'll talk more about this game's story in a bit. Towers in Time came in booster boxes with 60 packs, 8 cards per pack, as well as starter boxes with 12 decks and rulebooks, 54 cards per deck, as well as a rules tip card, and this thing. How many of you who actually played this back in the day filled these out? By the way, I'd like to point out that sealed starter deck boxes do come with 12 rulebooks all smashed together on the side of the box with a rubber band. Also, and this is something that I found really interesting, the seal itself. Most CCG game seals at this time were plain, just like this. No logos, nothing at all. Even the seals on Magic boxes from this time were like this. Unless you're Hyborian Gates, I suppose. Card rarity is the typical common, uncommon, and rare system, much like used in Magic. There are 150 unique cards total in the set, with 54 rares, 62 uncommons, and 34 commons. Card distribution, at least in booster packs, is wacky. You are not guaranteed to get a rare in each booster, which is fine when dealing with packs with only 8 cards, but there was an instance when I found 6 uncommons, 2 of which were the same card, and just 2 commons. Another pack produced 2 rares, 4 uncommons, and again 2 commons. The most frequent pattern I noticed was 4 commons and uncommons, but again, this isn't a guarantee. Thankfully, the cards themselves look and feel well made. The colors are vibrant, the theme is strong, the feel is slick and polished, the smell is minty, and the artwork is all over the place. This game only had a total of 4 artists, and man did these artists do wildly different things. Randall Spengler's works stand out as being the best of the lot to me, while Steve Miller, not that Steve Miller, well, what can I say? Between raising the dead with a Triforce thing and 5 of the 7 Dragon Balls, breathing fire with mutated candy corn on a flying saucer, and summoning a Wraith by making the MTG card Word of Command look truly epic, I'd say we're approaching Crayola Factory territory here. As in, this artwork is laughably bad, and I really hate to say things like that when describing these pieces of art. I'm sure that Steve tried his best, but just like how I described some of Galactic Empires' artists, the output is terrible. The other 2 artists, Lucy Sink and Andrew Hale, are hit and miss. Some of it is adequate, while others are not so much, and Randall Spengler isn't Kaja Foglio. I honestly don't have much more comments about these. One final note about the cards is that there were some printing problems such as minor variations in color, and a strange problem that's almost like if a card became misaligned while the printers were hitting it, or vice versa. The latter problem is especially noticeable on the artwork. Not all cards are like this, and it is common to find 2 copies of a card, one with these problems and one without. From what I understand, the story involves some wizard dudes and dudettes from Hogwarts, I think, traveling through dimensions in search of power. Unlimited power, maybe? Initially, these dudes got along just fine. Their power and knowledge was shared, and friendship literally was magic. Magical artifacts were plenty, and the natives of these dimensions were like, sure, we'll let you come through. Eventually, there were too many of these magical dudes running around and too little power to spread like butter. As a result, they started fighting each other. These people got the bright idea to build towers in between dimensions. But these towers never stopped anybody from trying to fight one another. Those who were powerful wanted even more power, and man, there are tons of political jokes waiting to come out of the rafters here. Anyways, the rest of the story more or less ties in with the ultimate objective of the game. You play as one of these wizards, and you really want to make somebody's day horrible. Both of you put shields up, go to red alerts, and that's the objective. Destroy your opponent's shields, and you win. So, how does one destroy another person's shields? Let's really look at the cards to find out. Top right are 4 icons with numbers inside them. A circle, which represents the amount of temper produced, temper being this game's main resource. A rectangle, which represents the amount of temper used to play that card. A hexagon, which stands for how much attacking power something has. And a shield, which, as you might expect, represents defense. When something's defense goes down to 0, that thing is dead. Sometimes you'll see these icons with infinity symbols inside them, which means the actual amount is stated in the card's rules text. Below the card's name is some more icons, named glyphs in the rules, which represent things like card type, what abilities it has, and, if it's a creature, its status. There are many of these glyphs to go through, so let's get started. The first 3 glyphs I'll talk about represent creature type, and there are 3 here: followers, totems, and monsters. Followers are represented by an icon of a person and is your standard grunt, so to speak. They can hold totems and items and usually produce temper of their elements. I'll get to elements here soon. Totems are animals that can be transported as a minor creature to a tower, or a series of cards that start with a source, then a minor creature, a median creature, and a major creature, or a bunch of minor creatures, or a minor creature and a couple of median creatures, or, well, you get my point. 3 creatures is what I'm trying to say. They can also be attached to a follower. When attached to a follower, both the totems and followers' attack and defense are combined, and the stack is represented as 1 creature, but the totem status is not combined. I guess I should talk status quickly. Each creature has 3 different status types: minor, median, and major. Status only really affects things like destroying shields and order of play. By order of play, I mean you cannot play a median creature before a minor, and the same is true for a major before a median. It takes 4 minor creatures, or 2 medians, or 1 major to destroy a shield. This status system is arguably the most interesting part of the game for me. It basically forces you to play your smaller creatures first, and I actually don't mind this. The last creature type is monsters, which is basically the same thing as a follower, except monsters cannot hold items. Objects are another major card type, and they are also represented by 3 glyphs. Sources are basically like lands from Magic. They produce temper or mana of their element. Items can be carried by followers, and any glyphs that appear on them will be applied to the follower. If an item produces any special effects, the follower can use them anywhere, including combat. Artifacts cannot be held by followers and also have minor, median, or major status. Artifacts with attack and defense numbers can, well, attack and defend like creatures would. There are also only 3 artifacts in the entire set, and all 3 are rare, so kinda useless if you ask me. The next major card type is spells, divided into 2 categories: instants and enchantments. I mean sustained spells. Anybody else seeing a trend here? Instant spells are just that. You cast them, and they do an action that lasts 1 turn. Sustained spells are, again, exactly what you think they are. You cast them, they have an action that lasts more than 1 turn. Some of these have upkeep costs, represented by a circle icon with that card's upkeep cost inside, next to the sustained spell icon. Like items, if you play these on a target card, any glyphs and attack defense values are added to the target. Now we're going to get to abilities, and let's see how many times I say it's just like such and such from Magic in this part of the video. The Fast ability basically lets you use an action on a creature after combat. Quick is like Magic's First Strike. A creature with Quick deals its damage before a creature without Quick. Magical Attack just means that a creature with that icon deals magical damage, which only affects certain creatures. Regeneration is as you'd expect. you pay a cost to regenerate a creature with that ability, fully restoring its toughness. I mean defense. Flight, again, is as you'd expect. Flying creatures can defend against flyers and non-flyers, but non-flyers are stuck on the ground unless they have a ranged attack. Rather oddly, there's a rule that says that you can ground flyers until the end of a turn. It's odd because it's pointless. When would you do that? Ranged attacks are similar to Reach from Magic. These are usually represented with a bow and arrow icon, and next to it, the same hexagon with attack value as used for the creature's base attack. Army is reminiscent of banding from Magic. Any amount of creatures with this ability can attack or defend as one group. When damage is dealt to a group, the player in control of that group decides how damage is dealt. Also, good creatures can only band with other good creatures, and the same with evil creatures. Good and evil is a thing that exists in this game, and I'll talk about that when I get to talking about elements. A creature with an instant effect symbol means that an action is needed to activate it. Some creatures have abilities that don't require this at all. An octagon represents that the creature has paralyzed, which means that if you activate that ability, then that creature cannot take any further actions for that turn. If a card has invisibility, that means that it cannot be targeted by minor creatures, though medium and major creatures are unaffected. Come to think of it, I don't think I've seen either the invisibility icon or the paralyze icon anywhere aside from this rulebook, and I only know of one creature that has invisibility, the Cloaker. Wait, this game has Cloakers? Walls are a subset of sustained spells that add an attack and defense value to a tower. Finally, thank goodness, we have gates. These ain't Hyborian gates, no, these gates are a subset of source cards. Whenever you use them, they activate an ability and are usually destroyed along with everything else in its tower. Okay, now that you've absorbed that madness, let's get to gameplay. You need a deck of at least 50 cards with the same 4-of rule as in Magic. Then, draw 5 cards from your deck and place them face up somewhere near the middle of the table. These 5 cards represent your shields. Then, you draw a hand of 14 cards, playing a maximum of 8 of these afterwards, which represent who and what you start off with. You can only play creatures, items, and artifacts, and you can put these into play, or you can throw them into Limbo. Limbo is a holding zone that can hold a max of 6 cards. You must put a creature or object into Limbo before actually playing it. And when you do play it, you play it on the tower with the source that was used to pay for it. If Limbo is full, you cannot play any more cards until you move cards out. Simple as that. Now, one thing I wasn't sure about is sources. There is no mention of if you can play sources or not during this phase. So I decided to go ahead and play them. This won't be the first time you'll hear me complain about unclear rules. Following that phase, if you have more than 6 cards that you cannot play, then you must discard down to 6 in hand. You cannot have more than 6 cards in hand by the end of each turn. Then the main part of gameplay starts, and both players play at once. First off, there is an untap, straightening phase, followed by a phase dedicated to paying maintenance costs, then the draw phase, then the action phase. The current active player can either take an action or pass to their opponent, who then has the same options. End of turn is when one player passes 3 times, or both players pass. At that point, all players discard down to 6, and the player who begins the next turn is the one who did not end the turn by passing. There are 2 types of actions here, regular actions and free actions. All creatures, unless they have the fast ability, have 1 action that they can take. When you use that action, you must tap that creature to show that it has been used. The game calls this taxing a creature, and turning a card sideways for its temper is called sapping, because I guess they didn't want to use the term tapping, but still wanted to use words that sounded close enough. Regular actions include moving cards around your side of the table, attacking, defending, and playing cards from Limbo. Free actions include dropping or terminating spells, placing cards in Limbo, sapping, and maintenance. One of the most important parts of the game are the elements. All 4 classical elements, water, earth, wind, and fire, are present and accounted for. Typically, playing creatures and objects require temper of that element to play, such as a fire creature needing fire temper, and so on. What this also means is that you can play Avatar: The Last Airbender the card game by making decks filled to the brim with fire cards or cards from any of the other elements. And yes, I am aware that there actually is a TCG based off of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I might actually take a look at that game someday, but anyways. Not only are the 4 classical elements present, but there is also black magic and white magic. Black magic can only be used by paying temper produced by creatures, living temper as the rules call it, and cards represented with a black magic symbol are considered evil. White magic works similarly, getting its power from non-living temper, and cards with the white magic symbol are considered good. Also, black magic and white magic cannot exist within the same tower. There are also neutral cards, cards that have no element associated with them. Whenever combat is declared, both players declare attacking and defending creatures. These immediately become vulnerable, which basically means that these creatures have come out of their towers and begun their attack. If there were any bonuses at the beginning of combat, such as empowerment, which means that if a tower is full, then all creatures within that tower that share the same element as that tower's source get +1 to their attack and defense, they stay until the end of combat. Every action taken during combat must only affect combat, and each player can take as many actions as they like, so long as they don't step all over each other. Combat ends by one player passing instead of using an action. Like I mentioned before, the ultimate goal of the game is to destroy your opponent's shields. In order to destroy a shield, you must have one or more creatures, reminder of that status system I talked about earlier, be unblocked and remain alive by the end of combat. The rulebook talked about shields returning to full strength by the end of turn, and I was kinda confused as to what that meant. Does that mean that if you didn't destroy all 5 shields during one combat phase, they all return to normal by the end of the turn? Or does that mean that all damage dealt to a shield goes away by end of turn? I'd say it's the latter. One thing you can do with your shields is that you can take one down and put that card immediately into play, which counts as a normal action, at the cost of losing one of your shields. So, what I have just described is a game that wants to play like Magic, but can't because the mighty wizards, not talking about the dudes and dudettes from Hogwarts here, might swing their hammers around in protest. There are a few unique things that set Towers in Time apart, such as the minor, medium, major status system, and the shields acting as a player's life total. The rest of it, though, is very much like how Magic is played, down to tapping lands for mana to play spells and creatures. At least there's no anti-mechanic present here, thank freaking goodness. These similarities to Magic made playing this game a bit awkward for me. Often, I would forget about putting things into limbo before putting them into play. I'd argue that the limbo zone should be in limbo itself, but that would be an easy joke to make. I will give the game this, though. Towers in Time isn't terrible. Sure, it isn't the greatest thing to exist. Heck, I still consider this more than a bit below average overall, but I have played much worse CCGs. I even made my own fire-themed deck, which seems to work pretty well, and just for kicks and grins on a rainy day, I might even build water-themed decks and earth-themed decks and so on and so forth. The thing is that there are good ideas here, but these ideas are not well supported at all. One of Towers' biggest flaws is creature and card variety. How many times have you seen a card named Mjorn Elemental in this video so far? Sure, they could have went with more generic names like Air Elemental, but still. Each element is mostly represented by one kind of creature aside from these elementals. For water, it's the Sea Elves. Earth is represented by the Dwarves, fire by the Orcs, and air by the Karak, bird people. By comparison, just red alone from Magic the Gathering was represented, at least in those days, by orcs, dwarves, giants, elementals, goblins, and so much more. Sure, Towers has the occasional dragon, but would a Moranth dragon win against a Shivan dragon? I didn't think so. I mentioned earlier that artifacts do exist in Towers, but there are so few that you'll likely never play with one. I've also never really played with black magic and white magic cards. Again, there just isn't enough of those in the set for them to really make a difference in a game. And all black and white magic cards in the set are spells. Of the 150 cards, 4 of them are white magic and 8 are black magic. Okay, most of the black magic effects consist of bringing back dead creatures, which, in a game that is predominantly focused on creatures, can be useful. The 4 white magic cards, on the other hand, will all do different things, and Humble isn't that great of a card, even by this game's standards. Ultimately, the game being considered a cheap ripoff of Magic the Gathering combined with the unclear rules, hit-and-miss artwork, and lack of support from the company wound up making Towers in Time die a quick, painful death. The back of the rulebook lists several expansions that were being planned. None of these, as well as the original edition mentioned here, ever made it to market, as Thunder Castle Games and designer Mike Sager would shift focus to developing the Highlander CCG, which came out about a year later. I've heard the Highlander game is actually pretty good, which kinda makes me wonder. Anyways, this limited edition is, as far as I know, the only edition of the game that exists. Fortunately, for those who are willing to try Towers in Time out, booster boxes and starter deck boxes are readily available on eBay for decent prices. I know there are other online retailers selling sealed product as well, for, again, decent prices. If you do decide to dive in, don't expect anything beyond a game that wants to be Magic, but can't quite get there. And that's really all I have to say about Towers in Time. Thanks for watching, let me know what you think in the comments, and as always, I hope to see you again soon.